So, if you've ever had this nagging suspicion that your perfectly formatted, all green compliance reports don't exactly match reality, well, you're definitely in the right place. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to dive into the DVMS Institute's brand new AFR 004 course. Today, we're going to be completely challenging how organizations actually view digital system safety. Here's the roadmap for today's Explainer. First, we'll look at the assurance illusion. Then, why traditional tools fail. After that, we're shifting to observation, followed by triggering decisions, and finally, we'll break down the certification exam itself. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the assurance illusion, which covers Module 1 of the course. Now, I want you to ask yourself a serious question. Do your systems actually work under pressure, or do they just look really good on a screen? Traditional assurance relies heavily on controls and metrics to create this, sense of stability. The dashboards light up green, all the compliance boxes get neatly checked, and everybody breathes a huge sigh of relief. But here's the catch. That confidence, it's often based entirely on a representation of the system, rather than the messy reality. And that brings us to the core issue. Meeting compliance requirements often masks deep, underlying systemic risks. The DVMS Institute actually coined a term for this gap between perceived assurance and actual system behavior. They call it the assurance illusion. It's this incredibly comforting yet highly dangerous belief that just because a system checks all the compliance boxes, it's inherently resilient. And spoiler alert, it's usually not. So what's the fix? Well, the response to this illusion is the Assured Resilience Fundamentals course, or AFR 004. This course doesn't just tweak the old model, it reframes assurance entirely. It takes that dangerous gap between your dashboard and reality, makes it completely visible, and much more importantly, makes it actionable. Moving right along to Section 2, Why Traditional Tools Fail, covering Modules 2 and 3. Take a look at the stark contrast here between perceived assurance on the left and actual resilience on the right. On one side, you've got static governance, metrics, and risk registers. It looks great on paper. But on the other side, you have the operational truth of how a living, breathing system actually behaves in the wild. Traditional tools definitely have value, but we have to remember they only represent predefined expectations. They literally cannot capture the unpredictable reality of a modern digital ecosystem. So why exactly do these traditional models break down? It's simple, really. Dynamic, complex systems completely invalidate any assumption of predictability. Think about it. Modern digital systems are deeply, deeply interdependent. They exhibit emergent behavior, meaning they act in ways you literally cannot predict just by looking at their individual parts in isolation. When the ground underneath you is constantly shifting, static, point-in-time audits simply do not equal true assurance. Okay, let's pivot to Section 3, Shifting Control to Observation. This covers Modules 4 through 7. This is where we get into a major mindset shift. Instead of just validating designed conditions, the AFR 04 course cultivates a philosophy grounded entirely in observing real-world system behavior. You have to literally stop asking, did we meet the requirement, and start asking, how is this system actually performing right now when conditions change unpredictably? To actually observe that behavior effectively, we have to define our operational boundaries. This is a game changer because it helps you differentiate between abstract, theoretical risk and actual operational risk. You basically stop trying to track every single theoretical problem under the sun, and you focus your assurance efforts on what absolutely, positively must not fail. You define the critical boundaries, the conditions that simply must be maintained to keep the business running and sustain organizational value. But how do we actually know if those boundaries are holding? Well, through hard evidence. The syllabus makes a really crucial distinction here. Evidence is observable system behavior, period. It is totally distinct from those comforting narratives we like to tell ourselves. And here's another reality check. Confidence isn't about having absolute certainty. It's a judgment call based on that evidence. Uncertainty is just a permanent resident in modern complex systems. Evidence is simply how we learn to manage it. Which brings us perfectly into Section 4, Triggering Decisions with Evidence. This is Modules 8 through 10. As the course overview brilliantly states, insight alone is insufficient. Organizations must recognize when conditions require intervention. Knowing your system is drifting toward failure is completely useless if you don't have condition-based escalation. It requires absolute clarity on decision accountability. You have to know exactly when to step in, especially when you don't have perfect information. And what this creates is a really powerful continuous learning system. Think of it as a loop: decision, action, result, evidence. Your outcomes generate feedback, which then creates new evidence. That new evidence, in turn, informs your future decisions. So suddenly, assurance transforms from this annoying static annual audit into an active continuous cycle that actually builds real institutional memory. It's pretty cool when you think about it.
All right, let's wrap things up with Section 5, the AFR 004 certification exam. For those of you ready to formalize your understanding, the course concludes with the official AFR 004 exam. So here's the rundown. It's a 60-minute online proctor test. You're looking at 40 multiple-choice questions. The great news is there are absolutely no prerequisites to take it. It is graded on a pass-fail basis, and you're going to need a minimum of 24 points, which is exactly 60%, to pass the exam. Now, what I really love about this exam is that it skips simple fact memorization entirely. Instead, it tests advanced cognitive levels. You'll literally be applying concepts, analyzing complex scenarios, and evaluating some pretty messy information. And interestingly enough, it's an open book exam. Why? Well, because that reflects reality. In the real world, you always have access to information. Your success doesn't depend on what you memorized. It depends entirely on how you apply that information to dynamic, unpredictable problems.
So remember this number: 40. You have exactly 40 points possible to prove that you understand how to navigate complex, modern digital environments using observable evidence, rather than relying on static, outdated checklists. I want to leave you with this final thought. The next time you look at a perfectly green, beautiful compliance dashboard, I want you to ask yourself a really hard question. Are you relying on cold, observable evidence of how the system actually behaves? Or have you just been sold a comforting narrative? Take a hard look at your reality before stepping into the AFR 004 training. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer today, and keep questioning what you see out there.